Welcome to my humble channel, Sheep in the Mids. This is my first video and I look forward to the challenging journey into the world of markets along with you. The objective here is not just to deep dive into the technical analysis of Bitcoin or other assets, but also to look at the sentiment and the psychology behind the movements of prices going up and down. And my channel is not just focused on Bitcoin, but also taking a glance or a look at other assets such as equities, currencies, and the world economy in general. Because all of these are generally tied together by buyers and sellers. One of the things that is very important to understand will be the market key events for the week. And today is already June 14, 2022. And this week, for the next coming days, will be very pivotal because there will be several central bank decisions that we need to watch out for. So first is the US FOMC federal funds rate on June 15. Then on June 16, we will have the British official bank rate decision, as well as the Bank of Japan interest rate decision. So several central banks are making their decisions this week. So it is very important to keep that in mind. So when we see the price movements and volatility, then we have to keep this in mind, knowing, okay, what are the traders or investors trying to say? Whether is it to force these central banks to make a decision or to react to it, whether they like it or they don't like it. So that's very important to keep in mind. And one way to assess how people are feeling or how people are going through this coming few days is to check basically what are the headlines or what are the influencers are talking about or expressing. And one way to do that is to just check different headlines. For example, here in Cointelegraph, a lot of crypto users are taking to Twitter to lament the ongoing market downturn. So it's been pretty much beaten down. And once you see really these kind of articles and expressions, like from the Martini guy or from the Moon Carl, you follow these accounts not to follow what they're doing, but to assess how they are expressing their feelings and to assess at what stage are we in kind of a phase in the market. Yeah, over here at CoinDesk, now we can see other headlines that are propping up that we can see for today. All right, so we had news of more projects blowing up, like Celsius pausing withdrawals. BTC drops below 23K. Okay, some news about Bitcoin tumbles most in 1 year. Mr. Justin's son is trying to protect his Tron stablecoin. Okay, pretty much normal headlines here. But one thing that interests me is this section of JP Morgan wants to bring trillions of dollars of tokenized assets to DeFi. That is something worth researching more. And here we have ties with BlackRock and Monetary Authority of Singapore. So this really is a big deal. In the past few weeks, with Luna and USD, with Do Kwon, and now with Celsius, so everything is basically lining up for inviting the professionals like JP Morgan to come in to the market to be regulated and standardized by governments such as the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And this is bringing in a lot of money into the world of blockchain. So that really is worth something to note of. So that's a good thing. Okay, now going back to sentiment. Now we go to Decrypt, and we can see Jim Cramer turns bearish on crypto. And we have here some liquidity crunch on Celsius. Why is it crashing? NFT floor prices are continuing to sink. Ethereum flash crash. So everything is about market prices going down, especially for cryptocurrencies. Over here at Bloomberg, just to check what's going on the headlines for mainstream equities or mainstream finance, and we see here top of the headlines, grim milestones flash for Asian stocks, and we can see here market participants are expecting a larger Fed hikes for this week. So markets are pushing for 75 basis point hike instead of half basis point hike. You can still see here, okay? DeFi in turmoil, okay? Bear market has finally arrived. Here's how to move on and act now. So things are pretty much on the downside when looking at the headlines. And we go into some of the crypto influencers. I just choose randomly who are pretty much popular. And here from Crypto, he's posting up new videos recently. Is it Game Over, The Dark Truth, Dump? You can see here is pretty sensational in his expressions, and that's how he has been getting a lot of followers as well. And here, this is a key as well, as you follow these influencers, not to follow them, not to follow their decisions, but to assess what they are thinking and how they are influencing their followers to make decisions. And you have to take that into consideration and make your due diligence whether that would be correct or not. And there's another guy, that Martini guy is pretty much expressing what a turn of events for this influencer, from top 10 altcoins to buy and hold into being super careful and coping with the collapse. So that's what the sentiment is. Oh, and speaking of Jim Cramer from CNBC, this is the article for paid subscribers. What Cramer is watching for Monday, cyclone of stock selling and a crypto reckoning. So pretty much he's very much sensationalizing what happened or what's happening into the stock market and crypto. And you have to put into these considerations of the mindsets of the people in general, whether they are euphoric or there's a lot of fear or there's a lot of greed into the market. And looking at this, everyone's bracing for the worst, and that's something you consider then, perhaps. Remember, I have this meme that I always refer to. just a normal day at the nation's most important financial institution, you have to assess here in a very simple way in which way we are. In which phase are we at? Are we at the buy phase or are we at sell phase? And definitely right now we are in the sell phase. But at which stage are we in? Are we still in a total fear mode that's all about selling, or are we now in desperate mode, or this is madness, I can't take it anymore, goodbye, or are we now buy? So that's something to consider at where we are, depending on, especially not just on the market events, not just on the technical analysis, but as well as for the sentiment, right? We have to be courageous in the midst of being fearful in a fearful market, and something to consider as well. That's why we need to assess the sentiment as well. Okay, now that's now that we have gone through quickly some of the things that we use to glance at the current sentiment of the market, then we look now at the price action of Bitcoin. So if we zoom out, this is the chart I have for Bitcoin. The way I am tracking this is that we, from the leg lower from November 2021, has now reached equal legs, or has already exceeded the equal legs of the pullback from March 29 to this week. Yeah. So basically, this length of the pullback is now equal to the length of the pullback from March. So to me, this week is going to be a very critical week, because if we remain bearish, then definitely we have to go down lower into this price level of around 22,000 USD to BTC. And pretty much it's a long way down to around 12,000 or even 9,000 if we extend this. So from around 9,000 to around 12,000 US dollars for one Bitcoin will be the next area of support if we remain bearish. However, I remain optimistic given that most of the headlines now are fearful and equal, and we're at the stage basically of where pullback of equal length from last year have been met already. So I'm just waiting now. So important just to wait and see how the price is reacting at these levels, given that today is only Tuesday and we still have various central banks decisions to come. So this is what I am looking at, and if we go down to the 8-hour time frame, you can see that my indicators are showing it's pretty much oversold at these levels. However, oversold does not mean selling stops or that a bounce is immediately due. So we need to keep watch out for that. What I am on the upside, what I am pretty much curious to see to happen is whether we regain the weekly open of around 27,000, and the June open is set at around 32,000. And as we go through the second half of June, what I want to see now is basically whether we can reclaim the weekly open or close the month above the monthly open. So the key level here is basically the June open. If we close above this, then every bearishness is negated. If we close above the weekly open, it's around 27,000, then it just gyrates, and to create a consolidation phase over here. Now on the downside, what I'm looking at is around 19,500, around at these levels, and one more here to around 17,500 to see a reaction at these levels on the downside. And at this stage, I'm not a mind reader, so we have to watch out for both the upside and the downside in the coming days, especially with multiple central bank decisions to come. Not just that, one way to gauge as well is to see whether the sentiment or the price action is tied up really into a specific currency. So now we just look at BTC to USD. Perhaps we should look at BTC to Euro, which has taken a beating. The Euro has taken a beating over the dollar, but it remains pretty much weak as well. Bitcoin remains weak as well to Euro. Okay, now if we look at the Russian ruble against Bitcoin, so you can see here it's ever since the war on Ukraine, it's pretty much a steep dive. So Bitcoin has had no chance against the ruble, and Putin didn't even have to do anything against the ruble. So this is the strength of basically having a country, a currency, having a lot of natural resources or commodity-based currency. And yeah, so we can see Bitcoin is just free falling against various currencies. And if we look at the Japanese yen against Bitcoin, you can also see here that Bitcoin is also going down against the Japanese yen, and yen is pretty much a weak currency against the majors like Euro against Australian dollar or against the US dollar itself. And even with Bitcoin Japanese yen, Bitcoin has suffered a major setback as well. So these things are important to consider when looking at Bitcoin price, since we need to see whether is the price moving due to the currency or is it due to Bitcoin itself. And if we look at the Turkish Lira, yeah, even the Turkish Lira with its high inflation rate is still going down. Bitcoin is still going down against the Lira itself. And although not as deep as other currencies, but you can definitely see that Bitcoin is correcting against the Lira. So we can conclude here that Bitcoin is essentially just dropping like flies here. Regardless of what everyone says or what other groups of people say that Bitcoin is a store of value but currently against these currencies, it is pulling back right now. In general, across at least various currencies that we have checked. How about for the equities right now? One thing that I am really looking at is the S&P 500, which is correcting at the moment. And here I have drawn, I'm watching this falling wedge pattern, whether these will follow or are we going to keep on falling to this level? Or are we going to break out, at least retest the monthly open for June, which is roughly around at 41.50? So this really depends on Mr. J. Powell's decision on how much increase of the federal funds rate will be, and what will be his response to the queries and to the current situation, especially with the high inflation rate. So that's really something to note of. But we can see here on other stock markets. This is the Australian stock market. It's pretty much hovering near the 2021 lows. And if we go to other markets like the Hong Kong stock market, it's pretty much as well. This is also an equal legs have been met as well from the pullback. Yep, so it has met the targets here and it's now bouncing off. But again, this is really dependent on the central bank decisions this coming week. But Hong Kong stock market is really just on a sideways movement for several years now. One thing that I am interested in right now is the Germany stock market, the DAX. And here you can see it hasn't really fallen much. And it's pretty much on a sideways movement after the steep pullback at the beginning of the year towards March, where the war on Ukraine has started and pretty much the market is basically has gone sideways at the moment. This in spite of all the inflation rate affecting various countries, especially in Germany as well. So it's just pretty much at the moment sideways in its movement, or it's consolidating right here, which is not pretty good, because a consolidation will always, most of the time, will result into resumption of the prior move, which is downside. One thing that I am looking at is the corporate high yield bond via ETF here, and we are now at the levels of the COVID 2020 scare, and you can see here this is a good gauge recently on how risk assets are being seen, whether it's a buy or it's a sell. And here we can see now at the critical levels never seen 2 years ago, and we are back at where it has started, as people are looking at mainly at BTC USDT or BTC US dollar. One common mistake is to look at the DXY to see the strength of the US dollar. So this is a bit wrong when comparing with BTC, because there's no BTC inside DXY. DXY comprises mainly of the 60% of Euro and around 50% of Japanese yen, and both of these currencies are really structurally weak against the US dollar right now, and you can really see that it has really shown a strong move in the past weeks. So, but one thing that you can use is the USDT Dominance, which is to me is a much proper way of assessing the strength of the US dollar against cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin as well. And for the past few weeks, this is what I have seen in the structure of the USDT dominance, and where even though the price has moved out of this rising wedge sort of a pattern, we're now inside another rising wedge that is occurring here inside. And to me, if this really fulfills that the move here is going down and closing below the monthly open in June, then this will really be beneficial for risk on assets, especially for Bitcoin. And here we can see that I base this rising wedge pattern on the overbought levels that are occurring here. And if I draw a trend line at the moment, then you can see there's a clear, let me see if it's clear divergence at the moment. That is really occurring on the daily chart. So this is something that is worth looking at. And if we go on a larger time horizon on this structure, that if we go back down, closing below this level of around below 5.3% of USDT dominance, then it's going to go all the way here at this level at 3.2%. But that is very much an optimistic outlook for Bitcoin. But at this stage of timing, I'd rather focus on this area, as on the flip side as well, it can, let me just go back to the drawing. It can continue going up or even create a different pattern over here, hence creating a breakout level. So that's also possible. But the main focus for the week is how the central bank decisions will affect this structure. I believe it's a rising wedge and depends on the closing. But even you can see here the closing is like it's like an inverted hammer, but it can always go higher because days going into the central bank decisions like FOMC will have pretty much a volatile effect, wherein the game will be to hunt those liquidity stops from both upside and downside. So that's what to expect here as well. One way to know that inflation has reached its peak is basically to check at the oil price. Right now, it's still pretty much solid at this time, and anything that is above 103 or 100 US dollars. Here, I'm looking at the West Texas oil chart. Anything above 100, I think it's going to be structurally strong for this commodity, and inflation will still remain high at this stage. But definitely on the downside, once this channel breaks, then it will retest basically the consolidation area here. Then market participant stops will definitely be below here. So it's going to be if there will be going to be a liquidity hunt, then it is almost a guarantee or should be a chance to test these lows and see what's there. It can always go up, can always also choose to go further down. So it depends. We'll have to see how the market reacts at that stage of the when it happens. We have covered a lot on this day on a lot of topics and areas from sentiment to the price charts. And one thing that I want to show you that will help us a lot moving forward, especially when the markets start recovering, is having some kind of an objective visual board that would tell us the strength and or the momentum of the price appreciation of these crypto projects over short term and long term to help us objectively see which projects might be of interest to us just by looking at the price momentum instead of being influenced by influencers that are hyping the projects over in social media like Twitter or YouTube, and those really, really tend to tickle us emotionally to go into these projects without really seeing whether these are good projects or are they really performing well compared to other projects as well. So this is a visual board that I have gotten by using the top 750 projects in CoinGecko, regardless of the market cap, and it's something that I am using to pinpoint which projects that I would want to check further easily without looking at Twitter or social media or even the news, because especially when you have a very small amount of time that you are free, then it's a very good way to see how certain projects are performing compared to others. And I have divided it into two: short term, the 17-day, 14-day, 14-day, 30-day momentum or the price appreciation, which our focus will be on the upper right quadrants. Like for example, we have Litentry, you have Unify Protocol DAO that is up there as well. We have cells, we have day. Okay, we have mat. Some of the projects that are at least holding fairly strong over the past 7 days and 2 weeks. The same as well, we need to look at it on a monthly case as well. We want to focus on projects that are appreciating. And if you are a trader and you are focused on shorting or selling the asset, then your focus will be on the lower left quadrant on a short-term basis, because our goal here is to essentially see what kind of projects that are appreciating the most, and we want to be in those projects. We're buying strong in order to it to become stronger. Now on the right side of our visual board is our long-term trend. I'm using the 200-day price change percentage and using it along with the monthly or the 30-day price change percentage to see or gauge these crypto projects' strength on the long term. Whether is it already overvalued, has it already appreciated so much that the risk will be quite high getting into it, or is it just starting? Right? And that's really, really helpful from short term and long term to see this kind of a trend, to know where we are currently when we get involved into these projects, whether it's something that you want to buy or something you want to sell if you are a trader. And that's really is helpful. And you can really see here the projects are currently in limbo, yet there are some projects that are certainly of interest at the moment, like Litentry, like Unify Protocol DAO, or here in the long term, I can see XCAD network is really doing well compared to the rest of other crypto projects as well. Right. So this tool is really helpful moving forward, and I would really want to use this opportunity to really share this with you and to really use this in the next succeeding videos, especially when the markets are recovering already, and that's is extremely helpful to use this kind of tool, since you would expect thousands of projects to really just move in appreciation or depreciation, and you really want to find out which ones or which teams would be the next phase of the cycle, or which projects are really outperforming the rest. And that's really something to really look at objectively without the emotions or hype from influencers or what you find from social media. All right, we've been chatting for really discussing this sentiment, these price charts for I think nearly an hour now, and we just want to summarize for this coming week. We have the FOMC coming in. We have the Bank of England's federal funds rate, the Bank of England's rate, as well as the Bank of Japan interest rate decision as well coming through this week. And sentiment pretty much is all about fear right now. Headlines, we have talking about the situation of the market downturn and starting of the bear market. That's the talking points. Fear, and we're definitely in fear right now. And something to note is to observe the price action. So for me, this is what my takeaway is, to really observe how the market is going to react, or how it would really perform going into the central bank decisions and afterwards as well. The weekly close for equities on Friday, as well as the weekly close for Bitcoin, will be very important. Weekly close should be above weekly open in order for things to really get very interesting. And that's something that I would want to really see. And yeah, and that's it for now. If you find this video useful, and I believe you have, if you have reached this point an hour long into this conversation, and just perhaps like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you and I can get in touch once again whenever I provide an update. Well, all the best to you. Until then, take care and see you